This is Big Podcast.
It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I'm David Hooper. BigPodcast.com is the site. And if you want to grow your podcast, have more people listen to it, have people spread the message for you, make more money with your podcast, make people care about your podcast, change the world with your message, that's the kind of thing that I can help you with. BigPodcast.com has more information. I've got some episode templates for you. I've got some other free downloads for you to help you grow your audience. So go there now before you forget. BigPodcast.com has it all. On this episode, I'm talking about CPM and ad buying. CPM, if you don't know that, cost per mille, M-I-L-L-E, like millennial, means 1,000, cost per 1,000 listeners. An ad buyer to a podcaster may come to you and say, you're overpriced. I can get 1,000 impressions for $10 or $2.50 or $1, whatever an impression costs in whatever media they're comparing you to. Let's say you want $25 CPM, $25 for every 1,000 people who hear your message or who download your message. In theory, we all know that downloads don't necessarily equate to listeners. That's the best that we've got. 1,000 downloads, you charge $25 for that. That's 25 CPM. And this ad buyer says, you're overpriced. I can get something for 40% of that or 10% of that or whatever their cost is. This is what I tell people like that. Fine, go do it. Go to Pandora. Go to Google. Go to Amazon. Go to Facebook. I'm not going to compete with that. You are not buying ad impressions. You are buying a relationship. You're buying an endorsement. What I'm selling you, it's not overpriced. It's likely underpriced. Because if somebody sees you on Google, Facebook, hears you on Pandora, Spotify, there's no relationship there. It's just an ad. With the ad that I deliver, a relationship is attached. Let me give you an example from radio. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. They're what we call clusters. Let's say you go to iHeart. You say, I want to buy a lot of ads on country radio. I need women 25 to 34, and I need a lot of them. And they'll say, okay, we will take your ad dollar, we'll take your ad, and we will run it on a bunch of radio stations that we own that have these women that are 25 to 34. That's a cluster. You buy a package deal, and you might be in Chunky, Mississippi, and you might be in Enterprise, Alabama, and you might be in Nashville, Tennessee, Phoenix, Arizona, New York City. Who knows where you're going to be? Except that these stations that they are playing you on have women listening. Let's compare that, a big cluster of stations, to one independent radio station. I work with one. It's my flagship station for the syndicated radio show that I've got, WRLT in Nashville. And if you come to Nashville and you say Lightning 100 to anybody who is hip at all, they're going to say, oh yeah, I love that station. They're going to know the DJs. Hopefully they know my show. They're going to know what the station is involved with. Maybe they've experienced live moments from something the station has brought to town. They've got a festival every year. There is a connection between the people who listen to this station and the DJs, the music, the station itself. It is a community. So you can get this radio cluster with stations in Tupelo, Mississippi, and New Orleans, Louisiana, and Los Angeles, California, and wherever. Or you can buy a relationship and a community and a feeling and an identity. And you've experienced this, if not with a radio station, maybe with a podcast that you listen to. You connect with those hosts. You connect with those other listeners and what those listeners are trying to do. There's an identity there, a camaraderie, a feeling. That's the difference. If you go to Spotify, Facebook, whatever, versus your podcast, that's the difference. People who are listening to your podcast are no different than the ones who listen to this radio station in Nashville where I produce my content. It's an identity. It's a connection. It's a connection not only to the topic, but to the other listeners and to you as a host. What is that worth? That's worth a lot. That is worth more than what the ad buyer is paying for a cluster or for Spotify or for Google or for nameless, faceless impressions, especially if you're the one delivering the message. You're not just playing an ad with a nameless, faceless voiceover guy. I've told this story before, and I'm not going to call him out here, but you know him. He's a well-known business author, arguably one of the most successful, if not the most successful business author in the last 20 years. Came out with a podcast. Word from our sponsor. A nameless, faceless guy comes on, selling whatever he's selling. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. I wrote this guy, said, man, I love your podcast. It's really great. Why are you having this nameless, faceless voiceover guy sell your stuff? And he wrote me back. He said, well, we're not blank. And he named a well-known TV personality he used to do his own ads. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to argue with this guy. But he doesn't get it. Dropped in on him a couple months later. He's reading his own ads. Why is he doing that? Because reading his own ads works. Because people have a connection with this guy. They have a connection with each other. They want to hear stories about the product from each other. They want to hear stories about the product from him. That's what you need to incorporate into the ads that you're doing if you want to make this kind of money, meaning above the standard rate. When people come to you and they say, oh, it's $10 CPM. That's standard. $2.50 per CPM is standard, whatever. And it gets pretty low, by the way. I see a lot of guys taking $2.50. You're worth more than that. Yet here we are getting caught up in the listeners that people have. Let's talk about the money, man. $2.50 as opposed to $25. That's 10 times more money that you could be making on the same ad without having 10 times the listeners. You don't need all the listeners. You just need the right listeners. So next time an ad buyer comes to you and they say they want to reach an audience of 25 to 34-year-old females or whatever the demographic is that they talk about, you tell them that you're not reaching that demographic. You tell them that you're reaching people who know you and who trust you. They know each other. They're part of a community. They have an identity. What is that worth? You know them and they know you too. These ad buyers, they're not just getting downloads or impressions. They're getting an endorsement. They're getting a community. They're getting that feeling that surrounds your podcast, your topic, the community, and you. That's worth money. So act like it. I don't like CPM for podcasters. I think it undervalues your work. I think the very minimum that a podcaster should charge, $100 per episode. That's it. That's the minimum for now. Might be more in the future. And I'm talking about a podcast with maybe, 500 people downloading it, maybe 100 people. If you got the right 100 people, $100 is cheap. Your ad buyer could take that $10 CPM and reach 10,000 people on Spotify or Pandora or Facebook or wherever he's buying his ads, but he's not going to reach that connected audience that you have. It's worth paying for it. They're paying for results. They're not paying for impressions. That's another pushback for you. Hey man, look, that's great if you're buying impressions, but you're buying results. And results is what I can give you. Endorsement is what I can give you. People who love your product are connected to other people who will love your product and will talk about it is what I am giving you. That's what you get with podcast advertising. So consider it. Reach out to me if you've got questions. Bigpodcast.com is where to get me. When you go there, I've got some other things that will help you to grow your audience, make episodes people care about. And if you want more listeners, I'm going to help you do that too. I've got 25 episode templates. These will work for you. These are episode templates that have been tested. They will get more listeners to your podcast. It will make it easier for you to create your podcast, and they will make episodes for you that listeners will share with other listeners. They'll talk to other people about what you were doing. All of this available at bigpodcast.com. While you were there, subscribe to this podcast. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe is the direct URL for that. You'll see 3 buttons, one for Android, one for iPhone, one for RSS. Pick one. One click is all it takes. You will be subscribed. You will never miss an episode. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Go there now before you forget, and I will see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.